This is Michael from Blue Sky Bio. I'd like to welcome everybody who's joining us for tonight's presentation. A few points before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, as usual, please enter them into the QA chat box and they'll be addressed during the presentation. Please make sure to complete the webinar attendance form so we could send you the CE credit. The CE credit will arrive via email within around a week. Today's presentation is the second of a webinar series that we're presenting. The first one that happened is available recorded on YouTube. This one will also be available on YouTube, and you should register and check out the other scheduled presentations which are going to be happening in the coming weeks and months. For today's presentation, we have the honor and pleasure of hearing from Dr. Pete Stover, who's a longtime CEREC trainer, tester for Sirona Dental, and is going to be presenting on using the CEREC Guides with Blue Sky Bio parts. Dr. Stover?
All right. Thanks, Michael. First off, I just kind of want to say, I'm not an expert or a specialist. I'm a general dentist in Western Oklahoma. I've been placing implants for about 10 years now. Started with real simple ones, minis and cherry pick cases, and as I got further along, got into some tougher ones that I just started feeling uncomfortable with. Went back, got some more training on grafting, sinus lifts, things like that. So kind of learned to do it the hard way. And then, as a CEREC user, got into the 3D world, and that opened my eyes to another realm of possibilities. And then 2 to 3 years ago, I added a cone beam, the Sirona cone beam, and it simplified my life, especially as far as placing and restoring implants. And I've been a long-time Blue Sky user. And obviously Blue Sky has its own system for printing guides and using drill stops and things like that. It works great. But I wanted to also take advantage of the capabilities that the CEREC gave me to mill guides and kind of control things in a closed system. And so that's kind of, I had to find a way to incorporate the Blue Sky implants and the Blue Sky parts, Tibases, into what I had at my fingertips, which is the CEREC and the cone beam and the milling unit. So the gist of what I'm teaching is concepts for that, but there are also concepts in here that can be applied to any guided system, whether it's a printed system, exported to Germany or a local lab, whatever it is. A lot of these concepts can make those procedures much simpler than they are now, and decrease your inventory, make things a little easier. So going forward, you should be afraid, I guess, in a way. I had a guy, one of my computer guys told me that I had a little bit of mad scientist in me, and I guess this is my mad scientist picture. Actually, my staff, who's been with me, most of these people about 7 or 8 years now, I would come into work one day and that was my screensaver. So they had snuck in, got on my computer, and swapped my screensaver out. So that was kind of a shock to my system when I saw that. But one of their key players in this, because due to the simplicity of the system, I have been able to train these girls to do a lot of the work involved in making the guides. I can delegate a lot of that out to them. And then I come in, check it, fine tune it, make sure it's good, and then they can take back over and process the things. So the concepts I'm teaching and going to share with you guys, make things a little easier, can be, once you've mastered them, can easily be taught and delegated to your assistants. So that's kind of a nice thing to free up your chair time and continue being productive. So one thing I do not want to do is come in here and act like true old school techniques are out the window. I firmly believe the fundamentals are still there. These are the types of implants I was placing 8, 9, 10 years ago. They work great. This implant's now, I believe, about 6 years old. And it's functioning great. It's held up great, tissue, bone. I mean, couldn't want much more. But if any of you have ever kind of done this style of implant, you know that making temporaries is kind of a pain. There's not a real easy way to do it. You've got to worry about cement. Where's the cement? Is it, you know, you're going to have cement sepsis. Is this thing going to get somewhere we don't want it? Did you set the collar height for the implant properly for the tissue? Get it too deep. Now you've got excess tissue. Get it too shallow. Now you've got another pickle. So it's doable and works great, but there are things that you have to be very, very careful, very aware of when you do it. And so kind of as we look at new school, I would say just kind of what I mean by that, using 3D and digital technologies. You know, I'm reminded we live in a digital world. Our phones are automated. Our TVs talk to us and can answer questions. I mean, it's a digital world we live in. 3D scans, printed guides, milled temporaries. You know, with this, obviously, we've got no cement to worry about. This is put together outside the mouth. We've got, I was just talking to Michael, got an email today. We've got a 3D printer on the market for $1,500 that, I mean, goodness, that costs less than some curing lights that I've seen. So, you know, it's a 3D world we're moving into, and definitely want to take advantage of that. One thing of note, and I'm going to hit on this later, I just wanted to show the difference in this real quick. I'm going to show you guys some pictures. This is a scan post from Sirona, and this is a Tibase from Blue Sky Bio. So when I'm showing pictures of this later, kind of have this in your mind's eye. This is what we're talking about, what they look like in the mouth. And again, these are the temporary, and I'm going to show you some 2-year follow-ups on this later, but this was so much easier. I didn't have to worry about cement. Everything's milled, everything's done digitally. I'll do these all day. They're just so much easier and so much more predictable in my hands. So as I said, we're entering a 3D world, and you kind of ask yourself, you know, do we really need cone beams? Do we really need 3D? And again, I've only been in the 3D world for about 2-3 years now. But lo and behold, within the first 6 months of owning a cone beam, in walks a patient that with a pano in hand from another dentist. She's been to 2 or 3 dentists. She's got swelling on the right side, can't figure out what's going on. Actually has some form of drainage coming into her mouth, like I'm guessing through the parotid area. I mean, I'm scratching my head looking at the pano going, I see nothing. I grab my mirror, hammer on all the teeth, bang on them, put ice on them, have her bite on anything in the office I can find, nothing, everything's fine. So I go, hey, wait, I've got a 3D. Let's go snap a 3D. What do I find? She's got a wisdom tooth with a giant cyst, and it's setting up in her sinus. And so on the 2D pan, there's so much blurred. I could have looked at it all day and never found it. And so, you know, definitely, you know, I guess one of the sayings I've heard is you don't know what you don't know until you see it, and then you realize what you're not seeing. So just I won't hammer on this. This is another case. She'd been to a couple of dentists on a 2D X-ray, could not see that lesion just because of the anatomy and architecture of the jaw and everything that was going on down there. So, you know, we're all looking at it, and you know, again, suspected that tooth, hammered on it with a mirror. Oh, it doesn't hurt, no problems. And then, so take a 3D, and there it is. Sent her off to the endodontist, got that fixed, and saw her recently. Everything's healed up great, no problems. She's loving life again, but she was having pain and swelling, and, you know, had been all over the world trying to figure it out. And one more come in for an implant consult, the X-ray, and you know, obviously I see that big draining lesion into her sinus, and I asked her if she's had any toothaches or anything. No. And I said, what about headaches? Do you get headaches? And she's like, yeah, I do get headaches, and they tend to start on the left side, and kind of the worst on the left side. So, you know, I'm like, I suspect I know why. So get her to the endodontist, get the root canal done, and pain goes away. So she's doing better. So again, the 3D world, I'm learning more every time I fire up the cone beam. that I can't go back to the 2D world. It's a 3D world we live in. So enough of that. One more case just showing you, again, I was placing these freehand off of 2D x-rays. This one's, I believe, 5 years old, and we did not miss the mental foramen by much. Thank goodness. We've had no symptoms, no problems. This thing, like I said, it's integrated. It's been in the mouth 5 years. It's doing fine. But that was nerve-wracking, and I'd rather not do that. And with guided surgery, you know, we'll never dance that close to a nerve again, because we're in better control of everything. So yeah, that one was a little too close for comfort. And so again, here's an old school implant. Small drill, take it just short of the sinus, mobilize the sinus, using my bourbon drill stop to kind of visualize the implant, gradually drill larger, uplift the floor of the sinus. And this is one of those days where better be wearing your brown scrubs, because every drill you're just hoping that you don't press a little too hard and go flying into the sinus. And you know, it's pretty nerve-wracking doing it this way. So this one, as we look at this 6 years later, doing fine, everything's great, you know, no problems, never had any symptoms or any issues like that. But again, that the old school way just seems a higher stress level, more unpredictability, or at least more uncertainty what you're drilling at. This was kind of the one that got me started down this path. This is obviously years later when I've got the cone beam. This is the one that kind of got me started on the path of, you know, creating a new system, or merging the techniques of, this was done with the CEREC Guide 1.0. Obviously now we're using 2.0, which is, in my opinion, even better, more accurate, more streamlined, just a better process overall. But this was one of the easiest sinus lifts I've ever done. And here's why. So we've merged, as you can see on the top left, that's what the model looks like when it's merged with the CEREC scan, the restoration, the cone beam, and here's the implant I want to place. Obviously that's not going to fly. It's going to end up in the sinus. You know, there's several things wrong with this. The other problem is about a 5.0 drill is about as large as you can go with the CEREC guided sleeve, using the Blue Sky sleeves, and that's a 7mm implant. So obviously that leaves something missing. And so I'm looking at this going, I still want to use the technologies that I have and end up where I want to go, but how do I do it? How do I kind of merge all this information, still use the control and accuracy of the 3D guide, and get where I want to go? So I had to tell it a little lie. So what I did was, I still used my guide. I told it I was going to place this implant. So I built my drill. That's a 5.0 tri-lobe, and obviously that's not going to fly either. But I wasn't too worried about the coronal aspect of the implant. I was more worried about, where will my guide end up with my drill? You know, how do I get the drill to stop just short of the floor of that sinus, so I can bump it up, put some graft in there, and place my implant. So I looked at that. I looked at my drill, measured the length of my drill, my short drill, 5.0 in my handpiece, 20mm. So I went, okay, if I lie to this computer and tell it I'm set my D2 at 19mm, put my drill in, and take it to full depth till this thing hubs out, then I should be right on the floor of the sinus. So we fixed it. So this is a look at your basically just measuring the length of the drills in your handpiece. Now keep in mind, your handpiece might be different. You may have a thinner head or a fatter head exposing more or less of the implant. So you need to measure that, measure your drills. But here's what mine was. So my short drills are 20 millimeters extending from the hub of the handpiece. So here it is over, I've circled it on the left. So I paid no mind to what the recipe or formula says should happen to place that implant. I instead just lied to it and told it, hey, I want to put this drill where it ends, where I want it to end. And I really don't care what, the screen looked like that was saying, hey, this implant's coming, 4 or 5 millimeters out of the bone. So that's kind of it. Now, one of the important things, and this kind of, thankfully, Sheldon and some of the guys at Blue Sky were kind enough to teach me early on and really get me thinking about this concept of the D2. It's what's critical in understanding any guide, whether you're doing a CEREC guide or printing your guides or outsourcing them to CAD-Ray or whoever it is. If you know your drill depths, you can just place your implant ideally, set your D2 to the depth that allows you to bury the drill, and then there's no drill stop involved, no extra work, no extra parts. You just glue in your guide tube and away you go. Now, something to keep in mind here is the D2. A couple of thoughts on the D2. One, when you alter your D2 in your software, it does not move your implant. Your implant should stay put. So once you've placed your implant, you got it where you want it, and you go tweaking your D2, it should only move the sleeve height, or your cylinder, I guess I should say. And so when you manipulate that number, that is all that should move. Blue Sky has a nice formula that uses a D2 plus 9 minus or plus 10 minus the lip of the cylinder and some things like that. And it works great, but it doesn't always fit with what you want to do depending on what type of implant. And you've got the added drill stops and things like that. So my kind of solution to that was, what if we use our drills and just take them all to full depth and let that be our drill stop? So that's kind of the system that I started thinking about, and that's kind of what I've integrated here into what I'm doing. So
let me jump in with a few questions. Okay, regarding the case you're presenting, do you augment the sinus, or you just lift the floor if it's only 1 to 2 millimeters in?
This one I went ahead and bumped it up, and in this case too, it's so much easier because now I've got an osteotomy that's large, so I jumped straight to my largest osteotome, couple of taps, boom, there it went. I put a little, I think since it wasn't a large space I was filling, I think all I put was some surgical plaster in there, and then I took my 7 millimeter drill and just basically flared the opening of the osteotomy and left the top half of it alone and let the implant kind of expand as it went up. Got about, it torqued out at about 60. Honestly, the most difficult part of that entire procedure was I didn't put a tall healing cap on it. I went ahead and buried it. And when it come time to uncover that, bone had grown over the top, and we had gums in spades. We had tons of soft tissue. So the hardest part of that was getting back down there to it to put my Tibase on and restore it.
Okay. Are you using the combination of CEREC and Blue Sky for planning or restoring, both?
These are all done within the CEREC Sirona. Sidexis is the Sirona software. All the stuff I'm showing will be done within the Sirona loop of things. If you want to use the Blue Sky plan, you have to export the raw DICOM from your 3D into Blue Sky. Now you cannot export your scans, your CEREC scans. They lock those up. They do not open that up to an STL file. My understanding is you can buy a license to accomplish that, but it's about $25,000. And so that's their way of trying to keep everything in the loop. But as some of the information that's been coming out, scanning of models and some of the stuff Corey's doing, we're finding ways to kind of work around that. But so far, like I said, the focus of mine is all going to be within how I'm integrating the implants and parts from Blue Sky into the loop of the Sirona system.
Okay.
Okay, any others?
I think that's it for now. If there are questions, they can be entered into the QA box, into the chat box, and will be addressed.
Yep, fire away anytime. Okay. So again, and again, even though I'm showing this stuff within the software of Sirona, like I said, understanding your D2, that applies to, again, whether you're printing a guide, let's say you did buy one of these new printers and you're wanting to do a simple, no drill stop surgery, where all you've got to do is cement your tube into your printed guide. This same concept applies. If you're using the Blue Sky, the handpiece that Blue Sky recommends, which I am, the drills the direct cut drills, then it's just a matter of you print your guide, you set your D2 to 19, because all the short drills should measure at 20. Again, verified, measure, get your ruler out, measure it. But every one of them should measure at 20. So if you're setting your D2 to 19, and you have to, I'll show some, there are times when you can't. I'm going to show some cases later where you cannot. But if there's room to make it work, you set it to D2. You pump the drill as you go down until it hits the hub, and that's it. There's your osteotomy. And so again, this can be applied to any, whether it's, Sirona's key system. Let's say, for example, you want to use the Sirona key system, which uses, gradually enlarging drills. You still can do the same thing by knowing the length of your drills in the handpiece. You put your small key in, take it, bury it to the hub. Put your next key in, bury it to the hub, so forth and so on. You're still getting rid of drill stops, and that's one less thing in measuring if you apply these same principles to whichever system you're using. So obviously, I like the single drill protocol because it doesn't get much simpler than that. So that's kind of why I like kind of the system we put together here. All right. This is a fairly universal measurement from what my research has shown, whether it's the Nobel guide or 3i, if there's a lip or a key or a tube, they tend to add exactly 1 millimeter to the height. So you've got to factor that in. If you're using anything that sleeve in sleeve, anything that's going to go in that has a lip on it, you have to factor that into your D2. So when it's all said and done, you can, if your drills happen to measure 22, then you just adjust your D2 here. You measure your overall length, subtract 1 millimeter for the lip, and set your D2 there. Now and I'm going to show a picture of this in a second too. You can also use different landmarks on your drill. If where the flute's in, some burrs have, or some drills have a mark on the shank, you can put your own marks. So there are ways to go around where it's not just always bearing it to the hub. That's always my primary option, my primary choice, but it's not the only option. And one of the things I highly recommend, if you're going to do this, just like I did with my ruler, get your burrs out, your drills, twist drills, put them in your handpiece, put them on a ruler, take a picture, so that you have a cheat sheet. Make you a little cheat sheet book or just a reference guide, so that you know the different lengths of your different, where you want your D2, so that once you've gotten in the software, placed your ideal implant, and gotten your sleeve where you want it, now you can go look, all right, so my drill's for a trilobe or a max. I know exactly what the marks are on the shank, and I know the depth of the drill. So I recommend making a cheat sheet. It's good information to know in general, so you're not having to measure it all the time. But that's kind of what I do. I make a little cheat sheet like that. And so like here's another example. Again, Blue Sky, great formula, it works fine. That's how I started. I was using the Blue Sky recipe, worked great. I was having my drill stops printed, but again, I found a way to just simplify it a little bit in my hands, and it's worked really nice. But if you look at the picture at the bottom, you know, a lot of let's say that 20 millimeter, or setting your D2 at 19, your sleeve is going to hit the bone, or it's going to hit the soft tissue, but you're wanting to go flapless. That's an instance where you look at your drill and you go, there's the bottom of that black mark is 24, so I could set my D2 at 23. By the time I add my lip, that's 24, and so now I'm burying my drill to basically the black line, to the first edge of the black line. You're accomplishing the same thing. Obviously, in an area of a second molar, somewhere where it's hard to see, drill stops are nice, so that, you know, if the patient bites down, things like that. But also consider, you're not going to be placing 15 millimeter implants in the posterior mandible or maxilla very often. So most of the time, those are going to be short drills anyways, and so you're not having to worry about seeing the lines or anything like that. You're going to set your D2 at 19 and bury the thing. So, but again, make you a cheat sheet, take your pictures, you know, get out your camera phone. It's pretty easy, pretty quick. Okay, so let's get into the Cerec Guide 2.0. Let's talk about that a little bit. Here's just a couple of guides that we've made and used. They're very accurate. I've been very impressed with the accuracy of them. Everything's digital. It's a closed system. There's no crossing over of media. It's a milled guide. You can control aspects such as spacer, putting in viewing windows, things like that. You can make notches. Obviously, the notch doesn't really, you know, work with the guide tubes because they're a closed circle. But you can put notches so that you could, if you had an open sleeve system, you could slide it in from the side, things like that. But so it's very accurate. Milling, yeah, we've been milling within microns for a long time with the CEREC. They're about $56 a block. You know, printed guides, obviously the cost has come way down, but if you're outsourcing your guides to some of these labs, they're good, but you're paying them for their time, their materials, the cost is going to go up significantly. Again, control, you can manipulate your D2. There are other factors I'm going to show you in some of the cases that we're going to do. So you're not having to buy drills that have certain stops or certain depths, because again, that just adds cost. You're using your inventory, what you already have, what you're already familiar with, and making it work the way you want it to. So it's very nice for that. If you need to, if you're in a pinch, same day surgery. It takes about, the fastest turnaround you're going to get is about an hour, because you've got to scan the mouth, design a restoration, import that over, you know, into your cone beam, place your implant virtually, get all that set, move it back over. Mills in about 45 minutes, and then there's no processing after. You just knock the screws off, glue your tubes on, and that's kind of it. It's pretty simple as far as, you know, processing and making it happen. And like I said, my assistant does a lot of that work for me. You know, scanning, just designing design a crown so that it fits within the arch properly. Occlusion doesn't have to be a perfect restoration. It just needs to be in the proper place where the cusp tips are in their proper location. The emergence profile looks like it makes sense, and then export it over. Again, I'll show you the details, but I'm delegating a lot of the work out to other people, so it's saving me time and money. All right, so the limitations. There are limitations to the CEREC Guide 1.0, and that's, you know, that is, can be a hindrance. One, it's a closed system. You have to have a CEREC, and you have to have one of the Sirona cone beams, which is XG3D, Galileos, and so forth and so on. If any of you have ever heard August Oliveira lecture, he says you got to pay to play. And within this system, you do. Now, obviously, we like Blue Sky Bio and the things it's bringing in for the printed guides, and that brings the cost way down. But yeah, there's some more work. You're exporting things and getting outside the system. So there's limitations. it works great for within the system, and what it does, what it claims to do, it does very well. You cannot do a tissue-borne guide with this, or at least it's not indicated, and I've never tried. Now, could we possibly manipulate it into trying it? Maybe. I haven't gotten so brave yet. You have to stitch the images. So if a patient's got a mouthful of crowns and bridges and beam hardening and distortion on the cone beam, then at that point you've got to go to something else. CEREC Guide 1.0 gets around that by using a radiographic marker in the mouth. So you kind of have to pay attention to the restorations before you start trying to stitch them together. As of now, only one implant per guide. You cannot do multiple holes. I do not know if that's ever going to change. They don't let me behind the curtain very far. I do some training and teaching for Sirona. I get a hold of some of their toys and software a little before everybody else, so I can play with it. But I have no idea what the folks in Germany, if they have any plan on changing this. But as of now, just one. And the other thing, only 3 hole sizes can be selected, and they correspond with the tubes that you'll see on the Nobel or on the Blue Sky website: small, medium, and large. So the 5.0 master tube for Nobel is not an option. So that, not a big deal, but it does limit the variety and matches of the guides to the hole size. Okay, so it'll be boring, but here's a case. So we printed our guide. I did a little mini flap there, and so we're just slowly pumping the drill down, backing it out, making sure the flutes have a chance to clear out, just like Corey, Dr. Glenn showed. So it's pretty simple. You just take it till the handpiece comes out, and that was it. There, check the depth. We had some irregular bone around there, so I did a little bone profiling after that was done, and that was it. Implant placed. And to be honest with you, when I compare this process to the sinus lifts and the difficult implants I placed before, I'm like, I almost feel like it's cheating, because it has gotten so much simpler, so much easier, so much less stress. I mean, what'd that take? About 30 seconds to complete the osteotomy, and we're done. So one thing that I'll mention as a little side note, when I'm using the let's say I'm using the 23 millimeter D2 setting instead of the 19, I typically will take the 20 millimeter drill in first and bury it. What I'm doing with that is, one, I'm feeling to see how dense the bone is, especially in the maxilla and the areas where it's not real dense. I'll bury that. I get a feel for the bone. If I'm falling right through that bone and it's really soft, I will finish the bottom of that osteotomy with a downsized drill, so that at the apical 4 millimeters, 3 millimeters of that implant is going to give me a lot more initial primary stability. So sometimes I don't just grab my one drill and bury it. I'll use the 21st, bury it, and that way I've got the path is set. And so the other thing I'll do sometimes, if I'm doing a 5 millimeter in the mandible where the bone's really dense, I will take a smaller drill diameter in there to go ahead and get a pilot started, because sometimes those 5 millimeters, it takes a lot of pressure to get that through some of that dense bone. And I don't want to feel like I'm heating up the bone. So I'll usually take a smaller pilot, get it started, and then the 5 will drop down with minimal effort. So I do tweak the system sometime. I don't just go in blindly and just bury a drill. And that's one of the questions I get a lot of times from people who know I use this single drill protocol. What do you do if the bone's real soft? Well, there are ways around that where you can still get good initial stability by paying attention to what you've got. Use the readings on your cone beam to tell you how dense the bone is and things like that. So there's some flexibility in using that. So it's not just hey, we designed it to go this way, let's stick the drill in there and put the implant in and hope for the best. So there's still a little bit of thinking and common sense involved. So So here's another case. This is one, there was a day when I would have looked at this and gone, yep, let's take a 3mm implant in there, let's go flapless, and this will be done in no time, it's gonna be easy, and we'll call it good. Now I'm gonna point out a few of the things here within the software. Here's the outline of our restoration. Again, this is a proposed restoration based on a scan, occlusion. This is in the ideal location. This isn't a guesstimated tooth. So we know, because it would have been easy to look at this thing and go, hey, let's stick the implant right here. Well, that would have given me a tooth with a abutment that I'd have to angle, issue that I'd have had to manage. So one of the beauties of using the CEREC system is you're designing a restoration, and then you're designing your implant to go where the restoration wants it to go. And so that's huge when you're wanting to use screw retain restorations and not have to deal with cement, things like that. The other nice thing that you're going to see here, look, the data is giving me, this is the bottom of the cylinder. That's a soft tissue. I know if I plan on going flapless and that thing extends right here, that's probably not going to happen. I need to adjust my D2 or trim a little bit off the bottom of the cylinder. When the tube is cemented in, there is usually about a 2mm lip underneath that you can trim off. So there's a little bit of leeway, but when your sleeve and your cylinder are set down here, it's time to think about bumping your D2 up to your next landmark. Okay? And so now here's something critical here. We've got a big bony defect right here, and the soft tissue kind of follows that contour. This gal was, I believe, in a rodeo and got bucked off a horse and clashed her teeth together and did all kinds of wonderful trauma. But that was years ago, and now we're short on bone. So instead of just taking what, again, the easy, simple way, we used a combination of what we know with expanders and come out with a better result. So we went from, if we'd have just gone flapless, we'd had this small ridge of tissue to work with to make our restoration have a good margin that matches with everything else. So we didn't do that, and I'm kind of showing the final here. You can see we've got plenty of tissue. We've got a good emergence profile. This is a Teleo CAD temporary, so it's a milled temporary on a Blue Sky Tibase, and this thing, that's the day we inserted it. So, I mean, it's looking great. So I'm going to kind of show you. Here's what we did. The computer told the software we're placing a 3mm implant, and we drilled for a 3mm implant. Then we used the bone expanders from the Blue Sky kit to push that bone out, try to expand the buccal plate a little bit. And again, didn't go flapless, made a little miniature flap so we could preserve that soft tissue. So here's an example where I went with the 23mm measurement. So there's a mark on the shank of that at 24mm. So instead of burying this, we'll just be taking it to that mark. And so again, I was just making sure the flap was pushed out of the way and till we hit our, shank of the burr. So again, pretty tree. The guides fit. The guides do not snap. They're a passive fit, just in case anybody's wondering. But they're very secure. They don't wobble around. I like to keep positive pressure on them just to make sure. But yeah, I've never had a problem with one of them moving or bouncing or very secure. But I do like to keep a good downward pressure on them. And that was it. Okay, so osteotomy is done. Went through our series of expanders, dropped the implant in, and that's that. Put the Tibase on. That's called your scan body. The white pointy thing you see on the left. The picture on the right, kind of fuzzy, but I did that more just to show that where we planned our restoration and our implant to come out that restoration is exactly where we ended up. So, you know, we're able to use milled restorations and single abutment, hybrid abutments, if you will, without having to create a screw retained abutment with a cement retained crown and things like that. So that's kind of the beauty of doing it restoratively driven. You design the restoration, you put the implant where it will come through the restoration where you want it, and it makes restoring them so much easier, so much faster. And again, I'm pretty happy with that result. I can't complain about that, to be honest with you. It's pretty versatile here. Here's a case where the clinical crown's gone, broke off. So I just scanned it like normal, designed it. We did an immediate placement, extracted the tooth, placed it. I kind of laugh. I went ahead and designed a restoration. She wanted two implants back there. And so with the contour of the bone, that's what I had available. And I kind of chuckled that I even considered, why did I even design it? But it kind of made me laugh. So I was like, hey, look, we could put one here, but I don't have it within my skill set to flip that tooth and make it actually fit in the arch. So I told her one was as good as I could do. So placed her guide, and here you go. That's our for immediate placements. I think in this case I used the guide, used a 5mm drill, flared the top of it with a little bit larger drill, dropped it in, and there you go. So, quick overview of my technique, and then we'll kind of get into Tibases a little bit. And then at the very end, I'm going to go all the way through a case from start to finish so you can see every step. But I like to take an alginate. You can simply have scan your patient. I like an alginate in case I get to the stitching part and find out there's too much metal and it won't stitch. Now I can go back to my CEREC Guide 1.0, or I can do a printed guide. To do a printed guide, unless I want to do an STL export, I need that model. So I like having a model just as a backup. You scan it, you design a restoration just like you're making a crown for anything. You export it. I use a thumb drive. You can put your CEREC on a network. I don't, just because it simplifies my life. Put it on a thumb drive. You bring it into your Sidexis, you merge it, you place your implant. Again, ideally, if it fits, you set your D2 to 19, select what size of sleeve, check your Blue Sky website to make sure that they have a sleeve that matches that diameter, and then you export it back to your CEREC. There's a little bit of design work to designing your guide, and then you mill it and you put your tube in. Tibases, do we have any questions?
Yeah, a couple. One is, how do you match the drill width to the metal cylinder?
Basically when you look at the under the implant section on the Blue Sky website, there's guided implant section, and the tube that matches the implant matches the drill, so it's kind of all bundled together. So if I'm placing a 4.3 implant Biomax, when I look at the page for the 4.3, it doesn't matter the length. All you're worried about is the diameter. You order the tube that's on the website right there with it.
Okay, and that converts the size of the CEREC metal cylinder to the drill. Right.
There is no metal cylinder in the guide when it's milled. It just mills the sleeve. So it's just a milled tube, and then it fits perfect. You slide the cylinder right in it and glue it in. What I have found, just in my experience, the large diameter tube with I believe it's a 5mm. Sometimes you have the sleeve, the tubes from Blue Sky. Sometimes they have a little flange on the bottom, and I polish that off a little bit because it wedges a little too tight. So sometimes I just take a burr and just take that back a little bit. But for the most part, they drop in and fit great.
Okay. Another question. So you use the pilot to feel the bone, and then use the single drill protocol at the pre-measured D2. That's correct?
So, like, for example, in the case where I'm say I'm placing a 5mm in the mandible, I will put the guide in place and just take a smaller, let's say a 3.5 or 3.4, something smaller, and just kind of keep it centered within the walls of that to get the osteotomy started. Once that thing has created a guide path for that larger drill, I'll switch over to that, and it tends to fall in easily. If I just take that 5 and start hammering away on, dense bone, it generates too much heat, in my opinion. And again, this is mainly in mandibular bone, especially areas where there hasn't been a tooth there for 10 years and the bone's fully matured, fully healed. I like to get some sort of pilot started so that my 5mm has an easier time getting through there.
Okay, I think that's it for now.
Okay, and again, any questions you think of, fire them at me. But so now we're going to get into the Tibase restorations a little bit. So now we've got our implant placed. What else can CEREC do to help us produce a good final result? And so here's an example: 2 different Tibases. The one on the left is cemented with just a conventional dual cure resin. The one on the right is cemented with Ivoclar's. They sell a kit that has a real opaque cement designed specifically for fusing your milled restorations to the Tibase. And I just wanted to show the difference there. You can see how gray the one on the left is and how the one on the right is actually too white. But again, that's going to be the areas it's masking out the metal of the Tibase. The one on the left is also very over-contoured. I'm learning my lesson. Don't get so greedy and try to push that tissue around. Get your contours proper. And so that's something to look at. The other thing, keep in mind, if you look at the screw holes in the tops of these 2 implants, the dead center in the occlusal surface, that's what you want. You don't want to have these screw holes sticking out two ticks from the occlusal cusp where it's getting loaded. You want these holes in the center where there's good ceramic all the way around them. And that's, again, the beauty of doing guided surgery, so that the result puts your screw hole where it needs to go. And again, it simplifies your process later. So again, remember that the first x-ray I showed you, there are really 2 ways to get your scan for your CEREC. To mill and design your temporary restoration or your EMAX restoration. One is your trusty Blue Sky. I use these, love them. They work great. I've used the Sirona. I've used these. I can't tell a difference. If you put 2 in the mouth, I wouldn't be able to tell you the difference. So they're also considerably cheaper. I want to say at least $30 cheaper. I'm just going off memory there. So you're saving some money when you get your Tibases from Blue Sky. And again, they fit great. They come with a screw. What you'll need to do is get you a bag of scan bodies. These are they're just plastic snaps. That's what snaps onto your Tibase so you can scan it. Now, if you have a really deep implant, lots of tissue to get through, consider using a scan post. All this is it extends 4mm up before starting the platform of a Tibase. You seat it, you put your scan body on, scan it like normal. The main thing you have to do, make sure you tell your CEREC you're using a scan post, not a Tibase, because it factors in that added length. Most of the time I'm just using a Tibase. I'm going to be honest with you. I've used both. The scan post works great too, so no problems there. But even when I use a scan post, you can autoclave those, use them again. And one little side note, I've been switching my inventory over to the BioMax because all diameters use the same restorative platform. That means all you've got to keep around is 1 set of Tibases, 1 or 2 of the scan posts. Everything's going to fit no matter what diameter your implant is. So if you're wanting to keep your inventory simple, keep your restorative process simple, look at the BioMax line. I know they're coming out with the multiple platforms. but so far I'm liking using the single platform. Keeps it very simple. So what we need when you're getting ready to place your Tibases, you'll need your Tibase that matches your implant. Obviously, you get that from the Blue Sky website. If you don't have any scan bodies, you can order a bag of these. They're cheap. They're I want to say $10 and get a whole bag of them from Sirona. And again, scan post if needed. You got to have your CEREC. You scan these things in the software, and you've got to have the meso blocks. That's what they're calling these. What they are, it's pre-milled, and it has the little notch in it, and these things fit very, very tight on the Tibase. So they're very precise, very intimate fit. And so you mill those in your CEREC just like normal. I'm not going to get into the designing of them a lot. You could spend a whole webinar probably teaching that part. And again, for your final ones, again, for my temporaries, I'll use just a regular dual cure resin. For my final ones, I use the recommended kit from Ivoclar. The downside to it is that opaque cement is not light cured. You have to put it in there, hold the restoration on the Tibase so that it stays down for 7 minutes. Then it's cured, you can clean it up and do all that. But so for 7 minutes, you've either got to put it in a rubber band device or have your assistant walk around holding it, which is what half the time ends up happening to us. So stinks for her. So whoever's less busy gets to hold the Emax while it cures. So that's why I get impatient, and so I just switch to a light curing or a dual cure temporaries because I'm not too worried about a little bit of metal or graying of it. So seating your Tibase, I usually hand tighten it, verify it's tight. I'm not a big fan of cranking that Tibase down for a scanning purpose only, because every time you crank that screw to 20 Newton centimeters, you're going to have some deforming of the screw. So I'll hand tighten them, maybe put the ratchet on, give it just enough tightening that you can kind of feel it cinch. Take your x-ray. Keep in mind, you got to be looking for some things. I highly recommend, if you're going to get into Tibases, get analogs that match your Tibase so that you can see what you're wanting to see when that thing's seated, because more of these now are, we're going to conical connections, and they don't look like a flat shoulder that tells your eye, yes, that's seated. They look a little bit different. So again, put it on your analog, seat it, kind of get in your mind's eye what you want to see before you put it in the mouth, so you know when you take that x-ray what you want to see. And again, I went black and white here trying to show that's the little notch that this will slip over. After it's seated, locate your notch. I personally, when I can see it, I like to place the notch on the mesial. And the reason for that is you do not get to pick where the sprue goes on these restorations. All other restorations that are single unit, you can move the sprue around, put it where you want it. For some reason, the software does not let you do it. It moves it 90 degrees clockwise to wherever that notch is. So if your notch is on the facial, which makes the most sense so you can see it, your sprue is going to be on the mesial or the distal, depending on which side you're on. So now that's just more grinding and adjusting to make sure your contact's good. And so I'd rather, if at all possible, I like that sprue on the buccal or the lingual. Easier to see, easier to polish, just kind of simplifies my life. Something big that will make your life easier too, consider contouring your neighboring teeth. Because if you think about it, if you're placing the implant, the tooth to the distal has probably had a minimum of 6 months to drift, usually longer than that. So this thing leans forward, creating a big triangle. So you've placed your implant, it's placed perfect. You're going to drop your restoration in, and it binds on the distal. And by the time you finish grinding and adjusting, now you've got a real skinny point contact. The biggest reason for that is that tooth to the distal does not draw with the path of insertion. So contour your neighboring teeth. Just take a real fine carbide and then straighten them up, get you some good straight walls that match the path of your implant, and polish them up real good. And now you've got less of a food trap. Your restorations are going to see quicker with less adjustment. So if nothing else, remember that is a handy little trick I learned from James Clem. So again, in your mind's eye, this is what they look like when you're seating it and when it's all the way down. Now, the bad news, you can cram this thing on and seat it and have that notch not be lined up properly. I wish they would make the scan bodies a little more rigid so that that would be harder to do. But you can seat that and have that thing off center a little bit. What it'll do is it'll affect the timing of your restoration. It'll be rotated a little bit. So it's important that you dry it off real good, locate it. Sometimes you can even take a little Sharpie, mark that little line so that you can visualize it easily and make sure you've got the notch on the scan body lined up and you can seat it properly. Again, that's the benefit of using a scan post. It raises that platform up higher. You can see it easier. It's easier to verify that it's seated. So just a couple pictures here. That's the Tibase seated. That's your scan body on. And so you scan it with your CEREC, and then here's my armamentarium. After I've milled the restoration, I steam clean everything. I'll sandblast the inside of the crown. I'll sandblast the bonding surface of the Tibase. I will put just a regular bonding agent, resin bonding agent on the inside, let it react for a minute, air thin it, cure it. I will put Monobond Plus on the Tibase, which has a silinating agent. It's the same one that you use after you etch the inside of a ceramic. Same thing. And then that's just Hyperfill. It's just a basic dual cure cement. It's actually a dual cure composite. Put it on there, clean off the excess, light cure it, it's ready to go. Now, here's the game changer. This is what I'm more excited about this than just about anything. This is a case where these are immediately placed. The one on the right, patient's right, we just put a healing cap on. These replaced. I made 2 individual Cerec Guides. I'm going to show you that later. But what I did is I went ahead and put my Tibase on, scanned and milled a restoration for the one on the left. Once I seated it, verified that the timing was accurate, I didn't have any mistakes, I cut the thing in half and made a custom healing abutment out of it. On the mesial and distal, I did a small incision just on top of the crest, mobilized the tissue a little bit. We still had some blanching there. I made sure that kind of simmered down and didn't stay that way. But that was right after we seated the thing and plugged the hole. So now we've got a custom healing abutment that you could shorten it further if you wanted to, leave it a little taller, just depends on the torque value I get on the implant. So now that's all fine and dandy. It sounds pretty cool. 2 months, everything's looking good. You can see that tissue is responding nicely. This one was tricky because we've got all the ortho wires and retainers and stuff holding everything. So this one, I had to mess with the contour of it a little bit to kind of get around all that stuff. But when I just saw him, I believe this was last week, took her pictures, everything's going good. Now, here's the neat part. When it's time to do the final restoration on that implant on his left, I just go hit a button and I'm going to mill the Emax restoration because I can mill a virtual clone. All I got to do is go in the software, tell it we're milling Emax instead of CAD, and we've got our final restoration. So he doesn't have to come in again for any other procedures. Now the one on his right, we'll still have to do some tissue finagling, and I will put him in a CAD first to train the tissue and get it where I want to go. And as long as that looks good, same concept, I'm just milling a Emax clone, putting it on the Tibase. When he comes in, we're just swapping them out. But this is going to greatly simplify the restorative process. So if we've got a high enough torque value that I feel comfortable putting a custom healing abutment on, then we're already training the tissue to an ideal profile. And there's kind of like the encode concept, the work's already done, and then we're just swapping it over and making the final crown. And the seat appointment is, it doesn't get much easier than that. And when you think about it, like contour healers that you have to kind of hand carve, they're $40 or $50 a piece already, somewhere in that neighborhood. So you're spending a little bit more for your custom healing abutment, but it's also by doing it this way, you've got the restorative phase of your work is done. So this is, in my opinion, going to be a game changer in my practice and make restoring implants so much easier. And again, so here's those two implants. There's the one that the one on the left is the one I milled and actually seated. So that was before I cut the thing in half. So I kind of seated it, hand tightened it, verified that it looked good and the timing was accurate, that, you know, that everything was good. Again, I mentioned contours. I'm going to show you the importance of contours real quick. Obviously, this lady doesn't have the greatest hygiene in the world, but my CAD temporary on the left was over contoured. Tissue was inflamed. We were catching plaque. Definitely not what I wanted to see when she come back in. So we milled her final, improved the contour a little bit. This was, I believe, less than a week later, and we're already seeing better tissue response. And again, I can't make her plaque control magically better, but I can try to make that thing more conducive to tissue healing. And so what we did there is create a little bit of a concavity just below the gum line, and the tissue responded very nicely. This is the one I showed you right at the beginning with the temporary on. 2 years later, tissue's looking great. Everything's, I mean, we've had zero issues with this. And this is one because of the depth of that implant, we used a scan post to do that one. There's no way on earth you're getting that, you're going to scan that Tibase with a scan body on there. So this is one, you look at that, you go ahead and tell your assistant, as soon as you place it, give me a scan post because we're going to need it. All right, I'll blow through this one pretty quick because I want to get to that case at the end. I inherited this one from a surgeon in Oklahoma City, and this is why I do not like zirconia abutments. She comes in, she's got her crown in her hand. The screw has snapped. Part of the screw is still in the implant, and she's not happy because she's missing her front tooth. So the little tissue cleanup with the diode, just get some of the excess out of the way. You can actually see the little sliver of zirconia that is still in the implant. This is my own screw I put in to verify that I had the correct screw. So we clean up the mess, get the screw out, get the zirconia out. Unfortunately, we did not have a Tibase of that size because, again, this is a Nobel Active, I believe it used a medium platform. I had narrow because I used the narrow compatible for the Biomax. So unfortunately, didn't have a base. So I pulled the crown out of her implant, took a stone alginate, poured up a stone model, then the interproximals, made me a little suck down. And at least she's got a front tooth on. So, case out. Milled Tibase. That's it seated again. It's not a shoulder connection. So you got to kind of get used to seeing that. I know a lot of us are used to seeing that shoulder flat connection. These don't do that. Now, as a side note, here's a Blue Sky implant that we placed not long after we inherited her. And I would say we're doing pretty good. So kudos to Blue Sky, great implant. It's holding up very well. Again, no, don't over contour this thing down here. Give that tissue room. It will respond much better. So there's our Tibase, our CAD restoration in place. Tissue's a little red from injections and lasering and poking on it, but I think we're going to be able to salvage enough soft tissue that we'll have a good, we'll have her back to a good final restoration, where we'll just mill an Emax to match those and do a non-cement retained hybrid abutment. Okay, so the question is, and this is what's becoming more apparent, is, I get a lot of, again, I'm in Western Oklahoma, 2 hours from the nearest specialist, and I get these people come in, they see all of our computers, man, you're high tech, how on earth, why doesn't everybody have this? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know the answer because I don't know, is it high tech? Is it standard of care? These are those questions that seem to pop up when you're talking ethics and things like that. But it doesn't have to cost $1 million. These guys at Blue Sky are bringing ways where we can do this and bring the cost down. So use your resources. Again, I didn't know what I didn't know until I got in the 3D world. Think outside the box. Again, a lot of these things I did was by trying things that weren't necessarily from the recipe, but still staying within good, proper guidelines. Quick side note, I went to the state dental meeting here recently, listened to a periodontist and a prosthodontist both speak for 2 or 3 hours, and they spent 3/4 of the time talking about the old ways they did it, you know, and the principles and the things that were important, but showed all these old slides and how they had to, you know, have their temporaries waxed up at a lab ahead of time and all this stuff. And then right at the end of both of the presentations, they said, oh, by the way, here's some cases we've done now that we have a cone beam and an intraoral scanner. And they spent about 30 minutes showing how easy their life was. And I just scratched my head going, why wouldn't you flip that? Give me 30 minutes of you know, fundamentals, and then show me how you're incorporating the 3D stuff and making it work. So I just kind of, I found that funny. I just kind of scratched my head and kind of went away. So that's the gist of it. Questions before I show you a case kind of start to finish?
Yeah, there was a question that came in a bit back regarding the drill lengths of the direct cut drills. Do you find the drill lengths to be sufficient? And which one do you use more, the short or the long?
I use the short any chance I get because I can bury it to the hub and not have to look for lines and measurements. The long is, again, if the sleeve or the tube is going to be way down subgingival a long ways, and it tells me that the short is going to be a tight fit. And you got to consider too, if that drill has to wedge between 2 teeth and the acrylic of a guide, that can get real tight. So when that starts getting too low, that's when I'll switch to the longer drill. But the short is my favorite because it's so simple. You just bury it.
What do you do when you're placing more than one implant?
Like on the case that I'm about to show you, the case where the young man had the implant on the right and the left, I just milled 2 guides. If it gets beyond that, it's time to get a printed guide. You know, much like, you know, some of the other presenters have shown. I figured we didn't want to beat a dead horse there. So yeah, print a guide. I was sending them before printing came along. I was sending those things to Germany and paying $300 or $400, and was not super impressed with what I was getting back. So I definitely like. I mean, this isn't a Sirona. Sirona's not going to like that very much, but I'm a bigger fan of printing and keeping the cost down and keeping it right here in state.
Do you always place your implant submerged 1 millimeter from the bone crest?
I pretty much always do. I've just found that I'd rather have a little extra bone and need to smooth or profile than get it seated and wish that I had dropped it a little bit farther. So I typically drop them about between, you know, 1/2 to 1 millimeter. That's just my preferred technique. I mean, that's not, again, there's no magic recipe there, but I do like them down there a little bit.
Okay. Are there any questions or words of caution that you would mention when using the system that you're presenting, the combination of CEREC and Blue Sky?
I've tried to hit on some of the little pitfalls as far as some of the tricks, you know, as far as using the Tibases and some of the things that can throw you up there. You can, if you mill the guides, you can select how thin or thick you mill the guides, and I'm going to show that here in a minute. If you mill them really thin, and there's a long span, they can flex a little bit. So I don't like milling them super duper thin. I'd rather have them a little bit thicker. And then if I need to trim just a little bit off so that my handpiece can see, I'll just grab an acrylic burr and trim it off. So I keep mine between 2 and 3 millimeters thick. You can go thinner, but so that would be one kind of word of caution. Pay attention to how thin you mill them. Again, I like having that alginate backup in case you need it. If you are scanning, make sure you're scanning good, because any data that's not there for scanning your restoration, when you mill it, the computer has to guess what it looks like. Make sure you've got a very, very good scan, intraoral, whether any scanner. I mean, that's going to be true no matter what. So make sure you've got a good scan. Those are kind of the highlights. Other than that, I mean, I've found the transition to be pretty smooth.
Okay, great. I think that's it for now.
Okay, so let's just run through a case. I'm going to show you all the flow of this. Jump in if you have questions. So here's the case on the young man with the retainers and all the wires and stuff that he can't wait to get that popped off. Design restorations, normal basic CEREC protocol. Export them. You have to take it all the way to the milling phase. Export it as an SSI. I usually just put them on a thumb drive. And then here's what the stitching protocol looks like. Very similar across the board, whether you're using CAD, excuse me, or any of those. You pick common dots. And again, thankfully, there's not too much metal artifact here. Stitch, no problem. The screen on the right, that's where you verify the stitching. You drag it along, make sure the contours of the tooth, the line matches the contours. That's how you verify that you've got a good stitch. If it doesn't stitch right, do it again, get a better scan. So pay attention to your stitching. And then we went in, there's our virtual restoration, and again, our implant, got it placed. Nothing fancy there. We've got it's emerging through the center of the restoration, which is what we want. Here's where you pick your sleeve diameter, what it's going to mill. So here's where you have to pay attention to. So you've picked an implant. You need to go to the Blue Sky website. Make sure that they have a tube that will fit the small, medium, or large, whichever one matches. And that's what these are. And here in a minute, the screen will tell you small, medium, large. So when you look at the Blue Sky website and it has 3.0 implant in S, that's small. So that means you would want to select this tube, this cylinder diameter, and then the sleeve will drop right in. Now, something worth noting, with the Cerec Guide 1.0, you wanted the biggest one possible that would fit, that fits, the protocol, that you can get a guide tube for, et cetera, et cetera. With CEREC Guide 1.0 or 2.0, pardon me, you actually want to do the opposite. You want to go with the smallest one you can get by. And the reason for that is it leaves more room for the acrylic around your guide tube to make sure it's not, nothing's flexing, nothing's moving. So it's actually flip-flopped based on the way they mill. It's just the way they mill, basically. I'll leave it at that. So you actually want to do the opposite. You want the smallest one that you can get by with 2.0. And again, go to your Blue Sky website and make sure the tube and the drills are all of them fit in line, and they do. It doesn't take long to figure out which one. And Blue Sky packages them together, so you can buy the kit and it'll come with the implant and the tube and everything you need. So here's where this is a screen where you select. You're going to export the plan. So you click here. And again, so now on this case, large. So this is your last confirmation before you export it back to your thumb drive. So you're going to make sure that everything matches up. Did I set my D2 at 19? Did I select a large? Did I order a large tube to match? So there's your details, and make sure exports it. Now once you pop it into your CEREC, you import it. Doesn't take long. And so now you define the area where you want this thing to seat. You don't need a big overhanging, a lot of flanges. I tend to keep it just below the gum line. Now here's where there are a couple important things here. One, this is the rim, the thickness of the rim around. The smaller tube you can get by in the middle, obviously the more acrylic you're going to have here to support it. So that's why you want the smallest one you can. I haven't had a problem using large, but that's the general rule of thumb we were taught. Use the smallest one that fits what you're doing. The other thing, when you pull up the screen, if this little green tube is red, it's warning you that it is going to impinge on the soft tissue and it won't seat. So if it's red, you go over here and you look. and it'll say support grind out, support leave. If you leave it, it'll leave that impinging. So if you're going to do a flap, doesn't matter. You can leave it. If you're going flapless, you want this. It won't mill the part that impinges on the tissue. Again, there's another way around that too. You can once you've cemented your tube in, you can take a burr and trim off about 2 millimeters of the excess under here. But I usually, if it's just barely touching, I go ahead and grind it out. I just tell the machine, don't mill that. I don't want it to interfere with its seating. And so that's how you get around that. And again, here's the slot. If you're using one of the systems where it has an open slot, you want to load the drill from the side, you have that option. Again, thickness. So you can choose how thick you want this thing to mill. The thinner you mill it, the longer the milling time. The more off-angled the implant is from the path of the teeth, let's say, all the other teeth in the arch, the longer it's going to take it to mill, because it kind of has to mill that hole separately. You can choose how much spacer. I've just been leaving it at 60. And again, I'm usually milling mine between 2 and 3 millimeters. And I've had no problems. Again, if you've got a longer span, bump that up, make it 3, and then just trim off any areas that are a little, that might get in the way. And so that's how I get around that. So there's your initial proposal. That's what it looks like. You can put inspection windows. I like these. They make me feel better just because I can see that thing's seated. I like one on the mesial, one on the distal. So that's something like that's what I would do. That it's seated. That's kind of what it looks like. Put it in your chamber. You do have to have one of the newer milling chambers or an upgraded motor. You have to have the carbide burrs to mill these, and you have to pay attention to which. I've got an old milling unit and a new one, and they accept different size blocks. So those are the little details that you just have to pay attention to. Your local CEREC guide can make sure you get the right one. And again, most of them mill in about 45 minutes. Glue the tubes in, and that's it. Okay. Tibase, you're telling it, tell it what you want. HelioCAD. Tibase on. There's our restoration. There's basically what it looks like when it's milling. Again, because I didn't put the sprue on the facial, or the notch on the facial, my sprue's on the lingual, so I don't have to worry about it getting into contact. Again, that's what it looked like. Our hole's nice and centered because we put our implant where it belongs. And that's it. Do we have any more questions roll in?
If there are questions, they could be entered into the box. Let me just reiterate some things I mentioned at the beginning. Please make sure to enter your details into the webinar attendance form so that we can send you the CE credit. There are links for the form underneath the viewing window. And the CE credit should be sent within around 1 week's time via email. This presentation will be recorded and will be accessible via YouTube and the Blue Sky Bio website shortly after the presentation is over, or by tomorrow, the latest. This presentation is also part of a 7-webinar series, so we definitely encourage to register for the future ones on a variety of topics connected to implant placement and guided surgery. I think that pretty much wraps up the presentation. We're also a bit over the hour, so I'd like to very much thank you for the presentation. It was very informative, shows a combination of the CEREC system and the Blue Sky Bio parts. I think it's something that interests a lot of our users and viewers. So I'd like to take the opportunity to thank you for putting the presentation together and taking the time to present the presentation. And I'd like to thank everybody for attending. If people have follow-up questions, you can contact Dr. Stover directly. His email address is on the screen. If you have questions regarding the Blue Sky Bio parts, you can contact us via the website. You can email info@blueskybio.com, or if it's regarding guided surgery, plan@blueskybio.com. All information is on the website, so we definitely encourage everybody to go check that out. Dr. Stover, thank you very much, and thank you everybody for attending.
Have a good night.
Have a good night.